Jake Mitchell stood in the massive chamber of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime and felt the weight of 3 years pressing down on his shoulders. The chamber stretched out before him like a vast amphitheater with rows upon rows of alien delegates from 847 different species. Some had scales that shifted color with their emotions, while others floated in containment suits filled with methane gas. A few looked almost human, except for the extra arms or the fact that their skin glowed with bioluminescent patterns. Jake had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 3 years now, and every single day had been a lesson in patience. The humans had joined the galactic community with hope and excitement. They thought they would find friends among the stars and partners in building a better future for everyone. Instead, they found bureaucrats and bullies who saw humanity as nothing more than useful newcomers who could be pushed around. The latest demand sat on the podium in front of him like a slap in the face. The Zalari Empire wanted Earth to give up New Colorado. The colony world had been humanity's first successful expansion beyond the Sol system. 20,000 humans had spent 5 years turning that rocky planet into a home. They had built cities and farms and schools for their children. Now the Zalari claimed that humans were too aggressive for expansion and demanded the colony be handed over to them. Jake looked up at the towering figure of Chancellor Vexmar, who led the council sessions. The alien's forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke in the universal translator that turned his clicks and whistles into words Jake could understand. "Ambassador Mitchell, the council has voted on this matter," Vexmar said in his mechanical voice. The vote was 847 in favor and 1 abstention. Humanity must evacuate New Colorado within 30 standard days or face economic sanctions and military intervention. The chamber erupted in what Jake had learned to recognize as alien applause. Some species drummed their tentacles against their desks, while others released pheromones that created colored clouds above their heads. The Zalari delegation made a sound like breaking glass that meant they were pleased. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. Only 1 abstention meant that out of 848 council members, only the Corvin representative had refused to vote against humanity. Everyone else wanted to see humans stripped of their rights and pushed back into their home system like animals, being forced into a cage. He activated his personal communicator and sent a priority message to Admiral Steve Carter, who commanded Earth's orbital defense platforms. The message was simple and used a code they had developed for exactly this situation. Protocol 7 is now active. Then Jake looked up at Chancellor Vexmar and smiled. It was not a happy smile, and several of the closer alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats when they saw it. "Chancellor Vexmar and honored delegates of the Galactic Council," Jake said in a voice that carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "Humanity has spent 3 years trying to work within your system. We have followed your trade regulations even when they hurt our economy. We have accepted your territorial restrictions even when they limited our growth. We have paid your taxes and fees and licensing costs even when they seemed designed to bankrupt us." The chamber grew quiet. Jake could see confusion on the faces of delegates who had expected him to either beg for mercy or angrily storm out of the room. "We did all of this because we believed in diplomacy," Jake continued. "We thought that reasonable beings could work together to solve problems and build something better than what any one species could achieve alone. We were wrong." Captain Lisa Barnes received the coded message while the UES Liberty patrolled the edge of human space near the Vegan border. She read it twice to make sure she understood, and then called her senior staff to the bridge. The Liberty was one of humanity's newest ships and carried some of their most advanced weapons. More importantly, it carried a crew that had trained for this day for 3 years. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lisa announced to her bridge crew, "humanity has officially withdrawn from all galactic treaties. We are no longer bound by council regulations or territorial agreements. All human ships are to return to our space immediately and prepare for military operations." Her weapons officer, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Hayes, looked up from his console with surprise. "Captain, are we at war?" "Not yet," Lisa replied. "But we're done pretending that diplomacy works with these people." Back in the council chamber, Jake continued his speech while alien delegates whispered among themselves in hundreds of different languages. Some seemed confused while others appeared angry that this human was taking so much time when the vote had already been decided. "The council has made it clear that humanity is not welcome as an equal partner in galactic affairs," Jake said. "You view us as useful servants who should be grateful for whatever scraps you throw our way. You have consistently voted to limit our expansion, restrict our trade, and reduce our sovereignty. Today you voted to steal our colony and force our people from their homes. Dr. Rachel Woods watched the council proceedings from her laboratory on Luna Station. As Earth's chief xenobiologist, she had spent years studying the psychology and behavior patterns of the various alien species. She knew things about them that they probably did not know about themselves. More importantly, she knew that they were about to make the biggest mistake in galactic history. The aliens had studied human art and literature and philosophy. They had seen humanity's capacity for beauty and creativity and complex thought. From this, they had concluded that humans were soft, civilized beings who would always choose negotiation over conflict. They had made the classic error of confusing human civilization for human nature. Dr. Woods had tried to warn them through diplomatic channels. She had written papers explaining that humans were persistence hunters who had climbed to the top of their planet's food chain through intelligence, patience, and an absolute refusal to give up. She had pointed out that humanity's wars were legendary for their scope and intensity. The aliens had dismissed her warnings as primitive, posturing. Now they were about to learn the difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. Jake reached the end of his prepared statement and looked out over the sea of alien faces. Some were still confused while others had begun to look worried. The Corvin delegate who had abstained from the vote was staring at Jake with what might have been respect. Therefore, Jake said in a clear voice that reached every corner of the massive chamber, humanity formally withdraws from all galactic treaties and diplomatic relations effective immediately. We will no longer participate in council votes or abide by council decisions. Any attempt to enforce your will upon human territory or human citizens will be considered an act of war. The chamber exploded into chaos as hundreds of alien voices tried to speak at once. Chancellor Vexmar pounded his gavel and demanded order, but the delegates ignored him. Some were angry while others seemed panicked. A few appeared to be having what looked like nervous breakdowns. Jake Mitchell gathered his papers and walked calmly toward the exit. He had delivered humanity's final diplomatic message, and now it was time to go home. Behind him, the Galactic Council descended into chaos as they tried to understand what had just happened. They would figure it out soon enough. 3 months had passed since Jake Mitchell walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, and the silence from human space was becoming deafening. Not a single transmission had been received from any human world or ship. Trade routes that had carried human-manufactured goods for years now sat empty. Merchant vessels that had regularly docked at council stations simply never arrived. Commander Alex Turner, of the Corvin Diplomatic Corps, stood on the bridge of his ship, the Harmonies. Edge as it approached the border of what used to be called the human colonial zone, the Corvins had been the only species to abstain from the vote against humanity, and now they were paying the price for that decision. Their government had sent Alex to find out what the humans were planning and hopefully open some kind of communication. The first thing Alex noticed was the complete absence of human patrol ships. For 3 years, human vessels had maintained regular patrols along their borders, following galactic maritime law to the letter. Every ship had broadcast identification signals and followed established traffic patterns. Now there was nothing but empty space where those patrols used to be. Alex tried broadcasting on all known human frequencies, but received no response. His communications officer, Lieutenant Kira Voss, ran every scan she could think of, but found no trace of human activity in the border systems. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the galaxy. Back on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was facing its first real crisis since the formation of their government. Trade networks that had operated smoothly for decades were beginning to collapse. The Vegan Confederacy was experiencing critical shortages of medical supplies that only human factories had been able to produce in sufficient quantities. The Altarian Republic found itself unable to maintain its deep space exploration program without human navigation. Computers. Chancellor Vexmar called emergency session after emergency session, but no one seemed to have any solutions. The Council had assumed that cutting humanity off from galactic trade would force them to beg for readmission on whatever terms the Council chose to offer. Instead, the humans had disappeared completely and taken their advanced technology with them. Dr. Rachel Woods stood in her laboratory on Luna Station, watching the latest intelligence reports from across human space. What she saw both impressed and worried her. Every human world was engaged in massive military construction projects. Orbital defense platforms were being built around every colony. Shipyards that had produced civilian vessels were now turning out warships at an incredible rate. President Mary Collins addressed the United Earth Assembly from the Capitol building in New Geneva. The assembly hall was packed with representatives from every human world and colony. The mood was serious but determined. "My fellow humans," President Collins began. "For 3 years we tried to find our place in the galactic community. We followed their rules. We paid their taxes. We accepted their restrictions on our growth and expansion. We did this because we believed that reasonable beings could work together for mutual benefit." The assembly listened in complete silence. Many of the representatives had been born on colonial worlds that the council now claimed belonged to alien species. They had no intention of giving up their homes to satisfy alien greed. "The council made their position clear when they voted to steal New Colorado from us," the president continued. "They see us as servants, not partners. They want our technology and our resources, but they do not want us to have any real voice in galactic affairs. We are done accepting that arrangement." Admiral Steve Carter reviewed the latest reports from Operation Silent Running. In his office aboard the Orbital Command, station above Earth, human fleets had quietly withdrawn from all known patrol routes and trade lanes. Every ship was now operating under strict communication blackout. More importantly, human exploration vessels were pushing deeper into uncharted space than ever before. The Admiral smiled as he read the report from Captain Jenny Rodriguez, who commanded the Deep Space Explorer UES Pathfinder. Her ship had made contact with 3 previously unknown species in the galactic rim. Unlike the Council races, these new civilizations had been genuinely interested in peaceful trade and mutual cooperation. They had not demanded tribute or tried to impose territorial restrictions on humanity. Intelligence Officer Tony Miller sat in a secure briefing room beneath the surface of Mars, presenting his findings to a small group of military commanders. The information he had gathered over the past 3 months painted a disturbing picture of galactic politics. "The Council species have grown soft," Tony explained to his audience. "They have been at peace for so long that most of them have forgotten how to fight. Their military forces exist mainly for show and internal security. They assume that any real conflict can be settled through economic pressure or diplomatic maneuvering." General Paul Thompson leaned forward in his chair. "What about their weapons technology?" "Outdated," Tony replied. "Most Council species are using designs that are decades or even centuries old. They see no need to innovate because they have no real enemies. Meanwhile, we have spent the last 3 years reverse engineering and improving every piece of alien technology we could get our hands on." The meeting was interrupted by an urgent message from the outer system. The Zalari Empire had finally decided to test human resolve by sending an expansion fleet toward New Colorado. Admiral Carter was requesting permission to implement the next phase of their strategy. Commander Alex Turner finally received a response to his communications attempts as his ship approached the New Colorado system. It was not what he had been hoping for. An automated message played in perfect Corvan language telling him that all diplomatic channels were permanently closed and that direct approach to human territory would be considered an act of war. Alex ordered his ship to halt at the edge of the system and tried to process what he was seeing through his sensors. New Colorado had been transformed from a simple agricultural colony into a fortress world. Massive orbital defense platforms surrounded the planet. Ships moved between them in patterns that suggested a level of military organization that the Council had never seen from humanity. More disturbing were the energy readings his sensors were detecting. The weapon signatures were completely unknown and far more powerful than anything in Council databases. Whatever the humans had been building during their 3 months of silence, it was not based on any technology the aliens recognized. The Zalari expansion fleet was about to learn this lesson the hard way. Their commander, Admiral Zektar, had dismissed human military capabilities as primitive and untested. His ships approached New Colorado expecting to find frightened colonists ready to surrender their homes without a fight. Instead, they found something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The humans had spent 3 years pretending to be weak while they studied their enemies and prepared for war. Now the galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity stopped pretending to be something they were not. The age of human diplomacy was over, and the age of human expansion was about to begin. Admiral Zektar of the Zalari Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Talon, as his fleet approached New Colorado. He commanded 12 heavy cruisers and 30 escort vessels, which represented a significant portion of Zalari military might. The admiral was confident that this show of force would convince the human colonists to abandon their world without a fight. The Zalari had been expanding their territory for centuries through intimidation and superior numbers. Most species simply gave way when faced with a Zalari fleet, because the cost of resistance was always higher than the value of whatever territory was being disputed. Admiral Zektar expected the humans to follow this same pattern. His expectations died along with his entire fleet in the space of 6 minutes. Admiral Helen Ross watched the destruction from the bridge of the UES Defiance hidden behind New Colorado's largest moon. The human battleship was one of the new designs that had been built during the 3 months of silence. Its weapon systems were based on technology that humanity had developed by combining alien engineering principles with human innovation. The Zalari fleet never saw what killed them. Human ships had approached using stealth systems that made them invisible to standard Council sensors. When they opened fire, the results were devastating. Zalari shields that had seemed impenetrable crumbled under the impact of human plasma cannons. Their armor plating melted like ice under the focused beams of human laser arrays. Not a single human ship was damaged in the engagement. The Zalari fleet was completely destroyed, and their crews were either dead or drifting in space waiting for rescue. That would never come. Admiral Ross opened a communication channel to Admiral Carter on Earth. Operation First Strike is complete, sir. The Zalari expansion fleet has been eliminated. No survivors. Back on Nexus Prime, the news of the fleet's destruction sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. 12 heavy cruisers and 30 escort vessels did not simply disappear without explanation. The Zalari Empire demanded an immediate investigation and threatened military action against humanity. Chancellor Vexmar found himself in an impossible position. The Council had voted to strip humanity of territorial rights, but they had no legal authority to enforce that decision if the humans chose to resist. Worse, the Council's own military forces were designed for peacekeeping operations, not actual warfare against a determined enemy. Dr. Rachel Woods received classified reports about the Zalari fleet, engagement from her contacts in military intelligence. The tactical analysis made fascinating reading. Human forces had used hit-and-run tactics that maximized their technological advantages while minimizing their exposure to enemy fire. More importantly, they had shown no interest in taking prisoners or negotiating terms. The humans were not fighting like the civilized species that populated the galactic community. They were fighting like predators who had been pushed too far, and were now striking back with lethal efficiency. To engineer Dan Parker worked around the clock in the shipyards orbiting Titan as humanity's military production reached levels that seemed impossible to outside observers. The yards that had built a few dozen civilian vessels per year were now producing hundreds of warships. Every human world was contributing resources and personnel to the war effort. The secret was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. While their diplomats smiled and made polite conversation at council meetings, their engineers had been studying alien technology and finding ways to improve it. Their scientists had been developing new weapon systems. Their military commanders had been planning for the day when diplomacy would fail. President Collins stood before the United Earth Assembly once again, but this time her speech was being broadcast across human space on both military and civilian channels. Every human being in the galaxy would hear what she had to say. The Zalari Empire sent a fleet to New Colorado, expecting our people to surrender their homes without a fight, the president announced. That fleet no longer exists. The men, women, and children of New Colorado are safe, and their world remains under human control. The assembly erupted in cheers, but the president raised her hand for silence. Her next words would define humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. This is not a negotiation, she continued. We will not return to the council chamber to beg for mercy or try to find a peaceful solution. The time for peaceful solutions ended when you voted to steal our colony. Humanity will expand as far as we choose to expand. We will take what resources we need to support our people. We will govern ourselves according to our own laws and principles. Commander Alex Turner received new orders from the Corvin government as his ship continued to monitor the edge of human space. His people were terrified that they would be caught between the Council and humanity when the real war began. The Corvins had always been a peaceful species who solved problems through trade and negotiation. Alex understood that his government wanted him to establish contact with the humans and try to work out some kind of agreement that would keep the Corvins neutral in the coming conflict. The problem was that the humans were no longer interested in talking to anyone. General Paul Thompson reviewed the latest intelligence reports in his command bunker deep beneath the surface of Mars. Human exploration fleets had made contact with 17 new species in the galactic rim, and all of them had agreed to trade agreements with humanity. These new allies were providing resources and safe harbor for human ships operating far from Council space. Meanwhile, Council species were beginning to experience serious economic problems as human trade goods disappeared from their markets. The Andromedan Union was facing civil unrest because their citizens could no longer obtain human entertainment programs. The Vegan Confederacy was rationing medical supplies because human pharmaceutical companies had stopped all shipments. To Council space, the second Zalari fleet was already being prepared for launch from their homeworld. Admiral Gekvar commanded this force, and he was determined to avenge the destruction of Admiral Zektar's ships. This fleet was twice the size of the first one and included the Empire's newest and most powerful vessels. Admiral Gekvar had studied the reports from New Colorado, and he thought he understood what had happened. The humans had used stealth technology to achieve surprise, but that advantage would not work twice. His fleet was equipped with enhanced sensors and new scanning protocols that would detect any approaching human ships. Dr. Rachel Woods read the intelligence reports about the second Zalari fleet and shook her head in amazement. The aliens still did not understand what they were dealing with. They thought this was a territorial dispute that could be resolved through superior force. They had no idea that they had awakened something that had been sleeping for 3 years. Humanity had tried to be civilized. They had tried to be diplomatic. They had tried to find peaceful solutions to every problem the galaxy presented. The galaxy had rejected those efforts and demanded submission instead. Now the galaxy would learn what humans were really capable of when they stopped trying to be civilized and started trying to win. Captain Mike Sullivan watched through the main screen as Zephyr Station grew larger in the distance. The massive trading hub had been the crown jewel of Council commerce for over 2 centuries. Ships from hundreds of worlds docked there every day to trade goods and information. The station housed nearly 500,000 beings from dozens of different species. In 6 hours it would belong to humanity. Mike commanded the assault fleet that surrounded Zephyr Station in a perfect sphere formation. 50 human warships hung in space like deadly flowers waiting to bloom. The station's defensive systems were impressive by Council standards, but humanity had spent 3 years studying those same systems and finding their weaknesses. Station Commander Veltok received the human fleet's arrival with disbelief that quickly turned to panic. His security forces were designed to handle smugglers and pirates, not a full military assault by an unknown enemy. The station's shields could probably withstand a few hits, but they were never meant to stop a determined attack by advanced warships. Veltok tried to contact the fleet but received no response to his communications. The human ships simply held their positions and waited. No demands were made. No ultimatums were delivered. The silence was more terrifying than any threat could have been. Dr. Amy Clark broadcast from the human command ship on a frequency that reached every receiver on Zephyr Station. As director of psychological warfare, she had studied the best ways to break enemy morale without unnecessary bloodshed. Her message was simple and delivered in perfect galactic standard language. Attention all non-human personnel aboard Zephyr Station. You have 30 minutes to evacuate to your ships or to the emergency escape pods. This station now belongs to humanity. Anyone remaining aboard after the deadline will be considered a combatant and treated accordingly. The evacuation began immediately. Alien merchants and traders abandoned their cargo and ran for the docking bays. Emergency alarms blared throughout the station as beings who had never imagined they might face human military forces suddenly found themselves in the middle of a war zone. Captain Sullivan watched the evacuation proceed with professional detachment. Humanity was not interested in massacre or revenge. They simply wanted the galaxy to understand that the old rules no longer applied. Zephyr Station was a symbol of Council economic power, and now it would become a symbol of human dominance. Admiral Gekvar's second Zalari fleet dropped out of hyperspace, near the ruins of New Colorado's outer defense perimeter, expecting to find evidence of the first fleet's destruction. Instead, they found Admiral Helen Ross waiting for them with twice as many ships as before. The human fleet had been reinforced with vessels from across human space. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, the second Zalari fleet had joined the first in complete destruction. Admiral Gekvar died when his flagship exploded under concentrated fire from 6 human battleships. Not a single escape pod was allowed to leave the combat zone. Admiral Ross sent a message to Zalari Prime using the dead admiral's own communication codes. The message contained tactical recordings of both fleet engagements and a simple statement that humanity was prepared to continue this process until the Zalari Empire learned to leave human territory alone. Senator Vextar of the Corvin Republic arrived at the edge of human space aboard a small diplomatic vessel flying every peace symbol his people could think of. The Corvins were desperate to avoid being caught in the expanding conflict between humanity and the Council. They had been the only species to abstain from the vote against humanity, and now they hoped that gesture might save them. Colonel Nick Davis met the Corvin senator at the ruins of Zephyr Station, which had been completely stripped of anything useful and converted into a human military outpost. The meeting took place in what used to be the station commander's office, but was now a stark military briefing room. Senator, your people were the only ones who abstained from the council vote, Colonel Davis acknowledged as they sat across from each other at a simple metal table. We remember that gesture and we respect the courage it took to stand apart from the crowd. Senator Vextar felt a brief moment of hope that was quickly crushed by the colonel's next words. However, Davis continued in the same calm tone. You are still members of the Galactic Council, and we can no longer distinguish between those who actively opposed us and those who simply chose not to participate. You have 48 hours to evacuate your border systems. After that deadline expires, we will make no distinction between council members and neutral parties. The senator tried to protest that his people had always been peaceful and had never threatened humanity in any way. Colonel Davis listened politely and then repeated his statement word for word. There would be no negotiation and no exceptions. The Corvins could choose to abandon their border worlds, or they could choose to fight for them, but they could not choose to remain neutral. General Paul Thompson stood in the command center beneath Mars and watched as human forces advanced on multiple fronts simultaneously. Operation Clean Slate was proceeding ahead of schedule. Human fleets were striking at council installations across a front that stretched for hundreds of light years. The aliens had never faced a coordinated military campaign of this scope, and they had no idea how to respond. The genius of the operation was that humanity was not trying to hold territory in the traditional sense. They struck at economic and military targets, then withdrew before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Supply depots were destroyed. Communication relays were disabled. Trade routes were cut. The Council's ability to coordinate a response was being systematically eliminated. Admiral Kate Morrison led the Third Fleet toward the heart of Zalari space with orders to demonstrate that no Council world was beyond human reach. Her target was the Zalari homeworld itself. The plan was not to invade or occupy, but to show that humanity could strike anywhere they chose to strike. The Zalari homeworld's orbital defenses had been built over centuries and were considered impregnable by Council military experts. Massive shield generators protected the planet from space-based attacks. Automated defense platforms surrounded the world in multiple layers. The Zalari believed their homeworld was the safest place in their empire. Admiral Morrison's fleet proved them wrong in 6 hours. Human ships used tactics that the Zalari had never seen before. They attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, while jamming enemy communications and targeting specific weaknesses in the defensive network. When the orbital shields finally collapsed, the planet lay defenseless beneath the human fleet. The Admiral could have bombarded the surface and killed billions of Zalari civilians. Instead, she broadcast a message to every receiver on the planet. The message was simple and devastating. People of Zalari Prime, your government declared war on humanity when they demanded we surrender our colonies. Your fleets are destroyed and your orbital defenses are gone. We could end your civilization today, but we choose not to. Remember this moment when your leaders speak of human weakness. President Collins addressed the emergency session of the United Earth Assembly as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human forces had struck at 17 council worlds in the past week alone. Economic targets were destroyed. Military installations were captured or eliminated. The council's response had been confused and ineffective. The galaxy is learning what happens when diplomacy fails, the president announced to the packed assembly hall. For 3 years we tried to work within their system. We accepted restrictions that no other species would have tolerated. We paid tribute to beings who saw us as servants rather than equals. The president paused and looked out over the representatives from every human world. These people had built a civilization that spanned dozens of star systems. They had created art and literature and scientific discoveries that rivaled anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had tried to be peaceful partners in a larger community. The galaxy had rejected that partnership, and now the galaxy would live with the consequences of that choice. Humanity will expand as far as we choose to expand, President Collins declared. We will take what we need to ensure our survival and growth. We will govern according to our own principles and answer to no authority but ourselves. The age of human diplomacy is over forever. 1 year after humanity withdrew from the Galactic Council, the emergency session convened aboard the mobile command ship Concordia, floating in empty space between star systems. The Grand Council chambers on Nexus Prime had been claimed by human forces 6 months earlier. The beautiful capital world that had housed galactic government for 3 centuries now served as headquarters for human military operations in the core systems. Former council chairman Zurgoth looked around the cramped meeting room that had replaced the magnificent chamber, where he once presided over representatives from 847 species. Now only 200 species remained in active opposition to human expansion. The rest had either been conquered, absorbed into human territory, or had simply disappeared into the vast emptiness of space. Admiral Carol Wright entered the meeting room wearing the simple, gray uniform of the Human Colonial Administration. As military governor for the occupied sectors, she controlled more territory and resources than the entire remaining council combined. The aliens who had once dismissed humanity as naive newcomers now found themselves begging for mercy from the species they had tried to subjugate. Chairman Zurgoth rose from his seat, with as much dignity as he could manage. His species, the Altarians, had been among the most vocal supporters of restricting human expansion. Now the Altarian Republic existed only in the history books, and its surviving population lived under human administration on worlds that humanity had decided to spare. Admiral Wright, the former chairman, began in a voice that trembled despite his efforts to control it. The remaining council members have authorized me to open negotiations for a peaceful resolution to this conflict. We are prepared to restore humanity's full membership in the council and grant you expanded territorial rights. Admiral Wright studied the alien leader with the same expression she might use to examine an interesting but ultimately harmless insect. She had fought in 7 major engagements during humanity's expansion campaign. She had seen entire fleets destroyed and watched proud civilizations reduced to scattered refugees. The idea that these beings still thought they had something to negotiate with was almost amusing. Chairman Zurgoth, Admiral Wright replied in the calm professional tone that human officers used when explaining obvious facts to confused subordinates. There is no council for humanity to rejoin. There are no territorial rights for you to grant. You represent the remnants of a failed government that tried to enslave a species far more dangerous than you understood, President. Collins stood before the assembled leaders of 200 human worlds. In the great hall that had once housed the Galactic Council, the room had been completely rebuilt according to human architectural principles. Gone were the organic curves and flowing designs that aliens preferred. In their place stood clean straight lines and functional surfaces that spoke of human efficiency and purpose. Fellow citizens, the president began as her words were broadcast to every human settlement across a territory that now spanned half the galaxy. 1 year ago, the Alien Council voted to steal our colonies and reduce us to servants in our own homes. Today, humanity controls more space and resources than any single species in galactic history. The assembly listened in respectful silence. Many of the representatives had been born on worlds that had not even been discovered when humanity first joined the galactic community. The human expansion had been so rapid and thorough that alien observers often compared it to a natural disaster that could not be stopped or controlled. We did not seek this war, President Collins continued. We tried for 3 years to find peaceful solutions to every problem the galaxy presented. We offered cooperation and received exploitation. We sought partnership and were given servitude. When diplomacy failed, we chose victory. Lieutenant Commander John Blake filed his report from the frontier, where human exploration fleets continued pushing into uncharted regions of the galaxy. In the past year, humanity had made contact with 37 previously unknown species. Unlike the Council races, these new civilizations were offered genuine partnerships based on mutual respect and shared benefit. The contrast could not have been more striking. Species that chose to work with humanity found themselves with access to advanced technology, clean energy systems, and medical treatments that could extend their lifespans by centuries. Those that chose to oppose human expansion found themselves facing the same fate as the Council species. Dr. Rachel Woods reviewed the psychological profiles of the remaining alien leaders from her office in the former Council building. The data showed exactly what she had predicted when humanity first withdrew from diplomatic relations. The aliens had been so accustomed to dealing with civilized opponents that they had no idea how to respond to an enemy that fought to win rather than to achieve political goals. The fundamental error, she wrote in her final report on alien psychology, was assuming that human civilization represented human nature. The Council species saw our art, our literature, our philosophy, and concluded that we were too refined for serious warfare. They failed to understand that civilization is a choice humans make, not a limitation that constrains us. The report would become required reading at human military academies for generations to come. It explained why the most powerful galactic government in known history had collapsed in less than 12 months when confronted by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Newcomers. General Paul Thompson walked through the ruins of the Zalari capital, city on their homeworld. The once proud imperial capital had been reduced to rubble not by human bombardment but by civil war among the Zalari themselves. When their military fleets were destroyed and their government collapsed, different Zalari factions had turned on each other in desperate attempts to curry favor with their human conquerors. The pattern had repeated itself across Council space. Species that had presented united fronts against humanity quickly fragmented when their military forces were eliminated. Old ethnic, religious, and territorial disputes that had been suppressed by Council authority erupted into open warfare. Humanity rarely needed to occupy alien worlds because the aliens destroyed themselves. Commander Alex Turner of the former Corvin Republic sat in a comfortable office on New Geneva, processing immigration applications from Corvin refugees who wanted to become human citizens. His people had chosen evacuation over resistance when humanity gave them 48 hours to abandon their border worlds. That decision had saved the Corvin species from extinction. The Corvins who chose to join human civilization found opportunities they had never imagined possible. Human technology could extend their lifespans, repair genetic defects, and enhance their natural abilities. In return, they contributed their knowledge of galactic trade networks and provided valuable intelligence about remaining Council positions. Admiral Wright concluded her meeting with the former Council leadership by delivering humanity's final terms. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, and no return to the previous system. The remaining alien governments could choose to surrender unconditionally and accept human administration, or they could choose to continue fighting until they were completely destroyed. Most chose surrender. A few chose destruction. The result was the same either way. President Collins ended her address to the Human Assembly with words that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy for centuries to come. We tried diplomacy and the galaxy rejected it. We offered partnership and received demands for submission. Now the galaxy will live under the system we choose to impose, rather than the system they chose to create. The age of human diplomacy was over forever. The age of human dominance had begun, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. Humanity had learned that civilized behavior was a luxury they could afford only when dealing with civilized opponents. The galaxy had taught them that such opponents were rare indeed. The lesson would not be forgotten.